Time for My Boat.
Last week in My Boat, we covered the steps to repair this water-saturated swim platform. This week, we'll cover everything you need to know to get a professionally painted finish to complete the project.
The first task was to identify all of the areas that needed repairs, then sand down all of these damaged areas. Next, a Dremel was used to grind away all of the damaged gel coat where the hardware had been mounted and the surface dinged. With this done, the entire top surface was sanded to remove the old textured anti-skid finish, then the repairs were cleaned with acetone. To ferret out all of the damage, mass low viscosity resin and medium hardener was thickened to a peanut butter consistency with a mixture of 2/3 phenolic microballoons and 1/3 Cabosil. This mix was applied to all of the original mounting holes and blemishes in the upper skin and allowed to cure. The final step was to sand down all of the repaired areas with an orbital sander with 180 grit paper. The next task in finishing the platform was to detail the entire surface by sanding it with an orbital sander with 220 grit paper to ensure a flawless surface. As well, hand sanding was required for the curved surfaces and edges. Next, both sides of the platform were cleaned with a vacuum and thoroughly washed with Interlux 233 and brushing reducer to remove all of the dust particles. A batch of Interlux Prime Coat, a 2-part epoxy primer, was prepared using a 3:1 ratio of primer base to curing agent. After thoroughly mixing, a 20 to 25% ratio of 233 and brushing reducer was added to aid in flow. The primer was applied by roller, one section at a time, and tipped off with a foam brush to eliminate any air bubbles. When cured, it is sanded and cleaned again and a second coat applied. To finish off the platform, Interlux Perfection was selected and the required amount of paint and hardener for a 2:1 ratio was mixed, and the required 10% by volume of 233 and brushing reducer was added to aid in the flow. Using a foam roller, the 2-part paint was applied to both sides of the platform in sections, carefully working the surface to roll out the paint evenly and the air bubbles tipped out with a china brush on the upper surface. Once the first coat is applied, the paint must cure for 24 hours before applying the next coat. The final step was to create the anti-skid surface on the platform. The volume of Perfection paint required for the first coat was measured out, and the Intergrip anti-skid compound was added in as outlined in the instructions, mixing well and letting it sit for 20 minutes. While the Intergrip absorbed the paint, the surface was lightly sanded and cleaned. Finally, the area to be finished with anti-skid was marked out with masking tape, trimming the corners for an attractive radius. After the Intergrip had absorbed the paint, the required amount of hardener for a 2:1 ratio was mixed in, and brushing reducer was added again as well. Using a foam roller, the 2-part paint and anti-skid mix were applied to the platform in sections, carefully working the surface to roll out the paint evenly. Once the first coat was applied, the paint must cure for 24 hours before applying the next coat, rolling it out 90 degrees to the first to eliminate roller marks. Overall, this entire project took 14 days, excluding drying time for the fiberglass, with the toughest part being the removal of the fiberglass skin and the old core. Each of the fiberglass and paint steps took only a few hours each day.
With the finished swim platform looking great, all that's left to do now is to reinstall the hardware and the rub strip and mount the swim platform back on the boat. While it may be a time-consuming project, if you have some moderate skills with woodworking tools, patience, and some painting experience, it is a project you can undertake.